I really don't know what to do with all of my free time now. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the final episode of the Road to Scale Nationals. The road trip has passed. The whole thing is done. I put out all of the content, and this is the last episode of the series. In this episode, just wanted to run through the things that I didn't get a chance to cover in the videos in the couple of weeks leading up to the event, and then the actual videos from the event. Everything was such a whirlwind, from trying to get the vehicles completed to be able to go compete to the days of actual competition. Just everything just kind of blew past me, and I didn't really get a chance to show you the details of what got done in that final stretch leading up to this year's Scale Nationals. So I want to go through as much of that as possible, then a little recap of the event itself, what I did that I liked, what I did that I didn't like, what I would do differently, what I would do the same, and what I'm looking forward to in the future. So let's dive into first what we got accomplished to these trucks just before the event. We'll start with the Class 2/Class 3 here. Now, the last video before the event, I didn't even really have the body mounted yet. I had an idea of what I was gonna do there, saying that I wanted to execute a hinge setup, but that was kind of it. I hadn't really got to anything else, but we did get that accomplished. I made a structure in the back, and then I did a pin mounting type system in the front. This is very similar to the front pin mount that the Vanquish VS410 Phoenix uses. So I've got a single pin that goes through two mounts that are here in the front that mount through the front grille, and then there's a couple of tabs here on the front bumper side as well. I made those out of carbon fiber. There's some carbon fiber pieces here and a 3D printed mount that helps it all bolt through the grille. The pin I decided to make out of titanium as well, so I just welded up a little pin with an angle on it, and I machined a small groove in it on my lathe so that I could retain it with a body pin, but didn't end up needing to retain it with a body pin. It just kind of press fit just perfectly. It was pretty easy to do. So a nice little detail there that I never really got to run through and show anybody. The rear, I had put that titanium on the back side of the cab, where this bed area is. And there was another piece on the bottom side. And what I did is I made some 3D printed mounts that went down to these carbon fiber rear arms, and that all then tied into some other pieces of laser cut titanium that I had done at Send Cut Send. This worked out pretty well. I can actually lay it all the way back and it'll stay like that. It's not leaning against anything off camera. It just kind of sits like that. So a nice simple way to get this done. It was effective, and it's all I was after. You will also see that there's a windshield in this truck as well. That is actually just the windshield area out of the Lexan cliffhanger body that I was using earlier in this series. I just cut it out and it bolts through the body here with using the two front screws for the roof rack that I put on there. That, again, titanium roof rack, I got it screwed and bolted in. I had a number of those actually cut, and I used one to put on the inside of the body to act as a washer. I cut out all of the little inner strips of it just to make it a little bit lighter, but pretty simple process to have those two pieces mating together. As far as that goes, the body itself, that process wasn't too difficult. Getting everything mounted up and bolted, it just took some time to get things drawn and then 3D printed and welded. I also did a very simple rear roll bar hoop that was for scale points, as well as I welded on some little hooks here on the backside of the roll bar, and those were to work as my winch points. So in the video, I used it a couple of times. You'd extend the winch back, run it through, just kind of loop it in and then out so that you could pendulum winch off of areas. Worked out pretty well. I actually lost one of them in kind of a nasty tumble that this thing took after my last Class 3 course when I did a little bit of driving there, but it did what it needed to do while it needed to do it. Simple little things were added for scale points. I've got a gas filler cap here that came off the VS410 Origin body. I have a license plate from RC Plate Shop on there. Underneath of the body, you will see that there's a fuel cell back there. That was for the scale points. I printed it in red PLA, added some detail hardware to it, and then the silver color just comes from a silver Sharpie. The finishing of the interior itself, we got the 3D printed seats mounted. There's a tow rope that sits in the passenger seat, just zip tied in place. I 3D printed the dash. I've got some pedals in there. The steering wheel also came out of a VS410 kit, but that was pretty basic. The interior pan is a piece of 0.5 millimeter carbon fiber. I can't remember if I had that in one of the previous videos or not, but the battery door setup worked really well. These parts swung out so that you could actually lift the interior pan up to get to the battery, push it back down, and then just swing it back in place. I've got one of those on each side, and they can't swing out when the body is down because it's right up against it. That was rock solid. Beyond that, I do have the rear steer axle in this truck still at this point, and the rear steer works fantastic, other than how you saw I forgot to tighten down that servo horn on my second Class 3 course of the day. That was a bummer. I also machined some Delrin slider caps. These are some thin Delrin pieces that I machined to the same shape as the actual slider that's underneath of it, and then those just adhered to the bottom side. That titanium for the sliders had little windows in it, and I didn't want to risk catching it and just stopping the truck on course. It was a simple addition, didn't take that long, and I think that it was definitely worth it. But beyond that, the truck did pretty much exactly as I hoped. More drive time, better driving, all of those things, of course, come into play, but we'll get into that here in a little bit. Let's go over to the Class 1 though. The Class 1, a lot of work right up until the limit. I ended up making a different front bumper because some people were concerned about the legality of my first one, but was able to get that handled. The night before I left, actually, I had some other titanium tabs made, so welded up a simple bumper with just a straight bar. I built it right to the front of the tires though. If they were gonna complain about the other one, which stuck out a little bit further, I was like, well, I'm gonna make this one just right to the limit. You didn't see the fender flares beforehand. These are printed out of TPU, which is a flexible 3D printer filament. They've got a little bit of flex, not a ton, but just a little bit. And I needed these to make sure that I had half of the tire tread covered per the rules. I did something on this that I'd never done before. The 3D model for the TPU has a hollow section right where the screws would land. The purpose of doing that was it 3D printed with that hollow section, and then there was a pause programmed into the 3D print program. The head moved out of the way, and then I inserted a more rigid piece of material. That way, the screws had something nice and firm to press against rather than TPU, which can be a little soft, and the little tiny 2 millimeter screw heads would want to sink into it. So now it's got a nice rigid surface, and then you just hit continue with the printer and it finished printing the rest of the TPU. So these aren't 100% TPU. There's actually some more rigid material that is inside of each and every one of these fender flares. I'll go over that process more in depth later on down the road sometime, or possibly on one of the STL Sunday live videos. The interior all got done before the event, which included 3D printing and flocking all of the seats. This is the rear seat for this. This was just a single layer 3D print. So one layer all the way around, which the quality of that print before flocking was very marginal just because it was so thin. I didn't print it with any supports or anything. So, the print just didn't look great. But once you add flocking to it, you end up with a seat that looks really good and is incredibly light. So that was a really nice bonus. And I think this thing is a great way to go, especially if someone's like really worried about being competitive. I think if they're worried about being competitive and want their truck to look halfway decent, which that is not always a thing. This rear seat was just kind of a slide in, and it just press fits nicely in the rear there. But the purpose of adding a rear seat was because it gave me 4-seat interior. That seat in the rear is a bench seat. So that with the 2 front, 4 seats total, and then I get more scale points for the cage work that we put into this truck. This truck pointed way over the 60 points needed for class 1s. We did also finish the rear of the body. That included finishing both corners in the forged carbon fiber look and the tailgate. Tailgate, I did the same process. I really minimized the 3D printer time. I did a minimal infill. I didn't do as many shells. It was a much thinner mold. And that did mean that it's not the perfect one. It's got a little bit of not so perfectly flat surfaces here in the center, but it's fine. You know, there's some little pinholes and pits in various pieces of the forged carbon fiber. But by all means, I'm perfectly okay with the outcome of all of these things. It was a learning experience that I'm absolutely thrilled I just dove into like I did. I'm more surprised than anyone that it turned out as well as it did, regardless of your opinion on the looks. You'll also see that we've got these lenses here in the rear corners, and those are for the functional taillights. You can see the red taillights there. That's 1 inch of red LED strip behind some clear PETG printed taillight lenses. The clear look to the lens isn't exactly what I would want when the lights are off, but when they're on, they look great. So whether or not there's a way or a method, or if you can just buy, translucent red PETG 3D printer filament, could all be a thing. I didn't look, I didn't have time. I just got it done and moved on. Along with those taillights, I did have the Q series wired up, which are insanely bright. I mean, these things, when you were on course, if these things pointed directly at you, it was not great. I know I did that a number of times to Matt while he was spotting. I didn't put them on a switch or anything like that. When you plug the battery, they are on. That was just how they were wired. And that was as good as you were gonna get. The battery you can see I currently have just hanging here. I was running the 650 milliamp Genzace 3S LiPos. These are a 75C, so not a ton of amperage, but enough to get the job done in this truck. So it's installed, you can see it back in there right there, but it's way back, barely noticeable depending on the angle. The only thing you really ever see is the plug there, but if you pay attention and get that tucked away, it's not a big deal. Super simple, dirty, just got it done, and we were able to move on. I was thinking about making a cover for that before we went, and I didn't get to it, and I really didn't think that it needed it based on how out of the way that it was. The dash that's in here is not the dash that you saw in the last video. This one actually came from Westmade. He 3D printed and detailed this dash for me. I unboxed it on a live video, but I never got it put into a video before the event. He did such a great job on this thing. He put a ton of detail into it with the logo and the detail printing of the little knobs and gauges. I mean, just a wildly good job. However, I did take a chunk out of the corner of it on one of the courses. You know, it happened. It was a competition. I'm surprised that it got into it because it was slightly protected by the rest of the vehicle, but regardless, it did happen. So that wasn't ideal, but it looked fantastic when it was in perfect shape, and it still looks great now. You will also see that I've got the 4.19 Proline high racks on here on some different wheels than I was showing during most of the video series. These are Vanquish Method 101s with a clear outer beadlock ring and an orange IFR ring. I ended up going with a similar style on the Class 2, Class 3. That's with a gray KMC Machete with a clear outer beadlock ring and an orange IFR. Added just a little bit of color. I think it tied things together well with the orange dash and the very minimal orange graphics I put on the rear corners of the Class 1 body. So didn't throw a ton of orange at it, just enough to let you know it's there. And then the last major thing on the Class 1 was the hood. I had a massive failure on the first attempt where I had a hood that turned out looking more like a cow patty than an actual piece. It's actually back here on my shelf. It was a massive failure in the molding. Nothing went right on this. I had bought some of the orange e-glass from Composite Envisions, and I thought, I didn't think it looked good at all either. So this thing was also wild heavy. It was way too thick, and this was super discouraging because I thought that this whole thing was just going to be a massive failure and that I was going to have to do something else for a hood. But I made a last minute decision to try something completely different for the hood. It still is forged carbon as far as the look goes, but what I ended up doing was I 3D printed another mold. I took and put down a couple of nice layers of the chopped toe, just thin, put it in there, lots of resin, making sure that it had full coverage over the mold, but not very thick at all. And then I took a roll of regular twilled carbon fiber and put it over the whole thing. I had it pre-cut to shape a little bit, but I laid it in there and then did a final trim before I was done. But put that in there and then really wet everything down with resin. But before doing all of that, I had made a silicone inner mold for this process. I used a 2-part silicone rubber system where I mixed it up and poured it into the mold. I did degas it in my vacuum chamber. It said that it wasn't necessary, but we did it anyway. And then I used that silicone as the inner buck. Since I was going for something that was much, much thinner, I didn't need to leave any extra space, so I just made it the exact size. I made it a little bit taller so that I had room to compress it. But going through that, I clamped it as best as I possibly could with as many C clamps as I had available. I actually went and bought a bunch more for the whole thing. But in the end, I came out with a hood that was incredibly thin and weighs nothing. This thing is wild light. Now you will see that I've got some orange pieces of 3D printed material in here. And that was because of a slight issue that I ran into the day before leaving. I was working on the actual system that was going to mount to this hood, that was going to keep it held onto the rest of the vehicle. And I was doing something with a very sharp tool, not even in a way that I would normally misuse a tool, but in a completely new way. And I ended up burying this very sharp kind of 3-bladed knife into my left thumb. And with the way that I went into my thumb and the steps that I had to take afterwards to try and keep it from leaking everywhere, I was pressed for any time that I had left before I had to leave, because this was just hours before I needed to be packed and ready for a flight. So I took the original orange hood that we had seen through the majority of this project, and I just cut off the sides and I sanded it down, and then I epoxied it into this hood. So this is going to be the surface that will allow this to be affixed to the rest of the chassis here. I haven't done that yet, but it will be. I didn't run the hood at all during the event, just because if it got knocked off in any way, it was going to cost me penalty points. So I just decided to leave it on the bench and not risk getting any penalty points, especially since I had the full, detailed engine bay. Why not? So the event itself, the Class 1 did fantastic, really. Underneath, this is just a VS410. It's a VS410 chassis. It's the F10 axles. It's a VFD transmission. It's the 80mm S80 shocks. And it drives like I know these trucks drive. We added a lot of things onto the top of it, but it's carbon fiber and titanium and some lightweight 3D printing. There's a lot of it, but for the most part, the materials are pretty conservative as far as weight goes. The truck did end up weighing like 7 pounds, 7 ounces RTR. And it climbed like I wanted it to, or like I expected it to. The winch that I had in here was that Holmes Hobbies TGH winch, and it worked fantastic as well. I did add a second fair lead into the back side of the grill there, just to make sure that the winch line never touched the sharp edge of the titanium grill. That was just an extra little detail that I thought was needed, but it did everything that I had hoped. Even though that it wasn't built with as much competition prowess in mind as almost all the vehicles above it, I felt like that was a pretty good measure of what we had here in the end. The truck itself suffered really no damage. I mean, there's not hardly anything on here that you can see that was an effect of driving the truck on the courses. It rubbed against things, it rolled over, but everything held up extremely well. This truck it looks untouched as far as that goes. Even the axles are in really good shape with minimal scratches on them. The portals, in class 1 gave good clearance, great steering. So you'd hardly know that it went through some pretty difficult courses. I think the things that have the most wear are those Delrin sliders that I also added to this one. So this truck was fantastic. It was an absolute rock star, and it did everything that I hoped it would. The class 2/class 3 went through some much more difficult courses. Obviously, courses get more and more challenging as the classes go up. Class 1 sometimes feels like really challenging stuff just because tiny tires and, more restricted approach angles. But class 2 and class 3 at a nationals level put the hurt on some trucks and some courses. But I think that this truck did really well overall. The biggest thing I would change would probably be the height of the body and cage. The truck itself sits nice and low, but I had the cage and body probably sat about 1/2 of an inch too high. I could have got everything lowered down. It looked like it had more height than it needed, even though the belly was actually nice and low. So that would be the one thing that I would change most specifically. And that's just from watching the videos of it. This truck also had a lot more scale points than it needed. But I don't think that any of it was a huge hindrance. I added weight by doing this whole hinge setup. But again, it was one of those things that I wanted to build. I wanted to try it, and I like how that it looked in the end and the function of it. I think that the biggest thing that I needed on this truck before the event was more drive time in the class 3 setup, with rear steer. I should have, I needed time on that before the event, which I know. I don't ever drive with rear steer. My Capra 4-wheel steer was kind of the only truck that I'd driven with rear steer much in the last couple years. And jumped on the course with a truck that I hadn't driven at all before the actual course even. So what could I really expect out of that? As far as the results went, I ended up like 34th with class 1. I think I was 33rd in class 2 and like 28th in class 3. Class 3, there wasn't as many vehicles, but class 1 and class 2, there was well over 100 vehicles in each. So that I was very happy with. So what would I do differently? Looking at class 1 first, if I wanted to be more competitive, even if I still wanted to go down a very similar road to this, with the knowledge of what I learned from doing the forged carbon, I think that I could end up with a truck that was over a pound lighter. I don't think that that would be a stretch at all. Also, working with titanium, I think that that was a very valuable lesson that I learned there. I could make a number of these parts much lighter. Even using the same diameters, I could go with much thinner sheet metal pieces, and there's a few things here and there that I learned that I think that I could do better next time. I was super happy with the VS410 chassis setup throughout, so I don't know that I would change any of that. I think that that whole setup with the F10 axles, the VS410 chassis, the VFD transmission, I would stick with all that and do that exactly the same. I don't think that that was a hindrance in the slightest. More than anything, this truck was probably the biggest learning experience that I've had in RC fabrication in years or possibly ever. So this truck in that respect is super valuable to me and something that I really appreciate, and I will never forget what it took to do this build and learn what I did. I can't say enough how much fun it was to learn all of that and how much of that I will continue to apply in the future. As far as the class 2/3 goes, ideally I would build 2 separate trucks and have one truck for each class dedicated, because there is things that I would do differently for those. And of course, it would be nice to have the additional drive time on the truck in its ready to go trim, for each class. So that would be something that I would absolutely rather do in the future. For this truck, I didn't push as many boundaries as far as fabrication techniques that I hadn't tried before. The titanium welding that I did on here was familiar slightly from what I had done on the class 1. This thing, the biggest thing was that it was just kind of a stepchild as far as I was so focused on this. And then I was like, I got to work on this a little bit, and then back to this thing. And then don't forget about me, back to this one. So I just needed, it needed more time. It needed a little bit more refinement with setup and tuning than anything else. But again, It did most of everything that I wanted it to. I just know that I could have got a little bit of extra performance out of it with a little bit more time in the tuning department. But that's true for almost any vehicle at any time. Big question being, would I do it all again? And it's a without exception, huge yes. I had so much fun at the event, hanging out with all of my friends. Working all of the courses with Matt was one of my most favorite experiences though. Matt, not being the biggest comp guy, getting to spot him through everything was an absolute blast. At the end of this video, I'm going to tack on an additional portion that was sent to me by Steady Spin or Steady Foams. If you've maybe heard of the products that he's making for the SCX6 and I believe some 1.9 stuff as well. But he actually mic'd Matt and I up during one of Matt's runs. So the audio was really good and he filmed it from a distance. So it's a little outside in look but a close up of the audio. It's a good watch even if you watch the other 3 videos on our runs. Some of the best part of these events though is getting to hang out with friends, both at the event itself and afterwards. Our buddy Ben found us an Airbnb that was right down on the lake. I think there were 7 of us in that house and it was some of the best times. And everybody that was there was people that I met through RC crawlings. If for no other reason, find your way to an RC event near you. You'll make some great friends. But that is going to do it for the Scale Nationals for 2022 and for these 2 trucks. I think that these 2 projects have probably completed their journey with me and are ready to go on to greener pastures. Matt and I were both pretty excited after this event. We've already started discussing some possible plans for builds for Scale Nationals 2023. But I do hear that there could be big rule changes coming. So we'll have to wait and see what all of those details look like and what it could mean for our Scale Nationals builds for 2023. But with that, hope you guys enjoyed all of these videos. It was a lot of fun to do. If you did enjoy them, hit the like button, subscribe if you're not already, and hit the notification bell so you see the videos as soon as they get uploaded. But with that, thanks again for watching them. We'll see you on the next one. Here you go. Good, come out this way. Come right to the stick here, right here. You got it, work it out. There you go. That's fine. Right up here. Drop down, come up this. Then we're gonna make a tight turn and drop down in. You're gonna take 1 back to get lined up to 2, all right? Coming up, let it fall. Yep. There you go, now point right. This, your other right, there you go. Now stop, back up. There you go. You got it, trust it. Don't hit the gate. You're gonna come right towards my winch stick here. We're gonna hug tight to the top of this corner. All right, come down here. You got it, it's okay, work it out. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. There you go, no, that's fine. Stay high. Yep, not on it, yep, there you go. There you go, there you go. Yep, yep, point coming out. There you go, there you go, there you go. All right, we're gonna start moving now. Make some time between here. Right here, Matt, right to me. We're gonna go down this. Get lined up, it's good and square. There you go, nice. You got it, trust it. Good job. We're coming. This is the 4 with the bonus, or with the boundary. So come on this way. I want you to be able to be aimed a little bit towards the outside, just in case you got to bail. Okay. If you're going to bail, take the outside gate and just miss this boundary. You got it. Good job. Trust it. Don't stop. You got it. Trust it. Don't stop it. There you go. There you go. Now turn out. Turn out. Turn out. Turn out.
Progress 4.
You got it. Good job. Okay, come out.
Come up this way. You're gonna keep your passenger side tire close in here so you can climb up there without hitting the bumper, all right?
You got plenty of time.
Out, out, out. There you go, now turn.
350.
Good job, there you go, there you go. All right, we're gonna come out and make a loop. Come out this way. Watch this muck. You're gonna come out here, you got it.
Come on, everybody good?
There you go, now come out. Out, out, out. Come, yep, cut it hard, just like that. Keep cutting, keep cutting. Easy, easy, come, there you go. Keep cutting. We need to get your passenger side tire to climb this rock. Watch the bumper. There you go. Ah, that bumper, got it. You haven't touched the gate yet.
First one.
Did they make it count? Back up a little bit more. Further, 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 further. Now drop, now turn, yep, turn passenger. Now turn driver. There you go. You got it, you got it. Perfect, good job. Come this way. I'm driving 7.
Plenty of time, 2 minutes.
You got it. Easy. Okay. Here you go. Unhook. All right, winch and move. Let's go. Coming up 8, Matt. Make time through here. Good job. Keep coming. Keep coming. Make time. What's time, Judge?
1:30.
We got time. Nice. Nice. That's okay. That's okay. Come on. Come on. Ah, that's all right. That's all right. We're gonna finish.
Yes, we are. Ah, shit.
Well, you're gonna do your best to prove me wrong, but let's do it. Come on. That's okay. Make it count. You got it. Oh, no. Stop that. We're gonna roll over. Come roll over right now. Roll the truck or roll over so you don't fall. Now back out. Take another back. Ah, touch, touch.
Stop time.
Put your point this way. Nope, turn it around.
Any way you want.
Yep. Put your back tires there.
Just roll it out, stop time. Hold up, hold up.
Breathe. Relax. You got a minute to get there.
You got plenty of time. We just gotta check where your points are.
You got one more gate in your notes.
One more gate. What? Yes, 10 points.
You're at about 51.
51. Okay.
My math is correct.
All right. Come down right where I'm at, Matt. Right through here. Nice, easy. Little bit of momentum to climb up here. Watch out. There you go. There you go. Let's pull winch so we don't hit this gate. What? How much time?
30 seconds.
Come on, pull winch.
You got 20 seconds.
Ooh.
Got it. Got it. Go, 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 go.
Got it.
8 seconds.
Good work. Good work.
Thanks, man. Thank you. So unhappy. That was brutal.
He tried to prove me wrong.
Oh, God damn it, man. All it took was that one stupid thing. I shouldn't have reached out to grab it.
Yeah.
That's my problem, you know? I'm always like, I better hold this truck so I don't lose it. I mean, the alternative would have been
A reposition.
Right
Well,
down
this is the
that.
exact same thing, other than a broken truck.
You saved a lot of foot damage. The spotter, how did that go?
He listened a little bit better, which we. There's still a little disconnect between us. He got there. He listened. He did what I said.
For once.
I know. He finished.
There you go. Winch in.
Stop. Stop. Oh shit.
Pull it. Stop time. Stop time.
Again, this was a fun time we had here.
Yeah, this is a really good time. How does everybody do? We got 5 minutes to do it.
Hey Matt, I really think we found your problem. Yeah.
What's the ESC?
It's the smelly part.
It smells.
Damn.